Everybody for joining to find out what's going on with our freshwater wetlands. My name is Krista Spohr. I do freshwater outreach here at DEC within the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Bureau of Ecosystem Health. So an outreach coordinator DEC has never had one for just wetlands before. This was new because of the regulatory changes. So part of the legislative package that went through in 2022, they were allowed to hire 5 new staff members, 3 new biologists, a lawyer to make sure my boss stays out of jail, and myself, so I can tell everybody about these changes. So it's been really awesome to shout from the mountaintops how great wetlands are, because New York's never really had that person to advocate solely for them before. So, there you go. Let me get into it. So tonight we're going to talk about the Freshwater Wetlands Act. That's how our program is regulated. And it's currently through the Part 664. That's how we classify our wetlands. And that's really the part that we're changing. Why there is a need for change, the path forward. So our proposed Part 664. And I'll tell you a little bit about the advance notice of proposed rulemaking we did earlier this year. It was our first round of public comment on this. So Article 24, the New York Freshwater Wetlands Act, we regulate mapped wetlands that are greater than 12.4 acres. So we have maps that are regulatory, and we look at specific wetlands called unusual local importance. Those get regulated if there's something like a bog turtle, like a threatened or endangered species. We also regulate on a 100-foot adjacent area. Some people call them a buffer area. So, but that's pretty exciting because most of the states around us regulate only 50 feet, but we regulate 100 feet. And we classify our wetlands from 1 to 4. 1 being the most restrictive permitting process to 4 being the least restrictive. So in our existing Article 24, our current Part 664, like I said, we classify our wetlands 1 through 4, and we classify them on the ability to perform those wetland functions and provide wetland benefits, special ecological importance, like an inland poor fen, any special features, like I mentioned before, if it's a habitat for endangered or threatened species. And we also look at the hydrological and pollution control features. So there's 40 criteria in our classification. And for that class 1, that most restrictive permitting process, those most special wetlands, there's 7 criteria. So currently, like I said, we have regulatory maps, and those maps were made based on a field visit of each site, taking in consideration the wetland type, the benefits, and the distribution and location. So those are made by the old school cartographer, depending on what cartographer it was and how hard they pushed on the pen will make that wetland boundary either large or small. There's a lot of variation in it, because we had to go to each field, each site. So a little context. In 1975, the Article 24 Freshwater Wetlands Act was enacted. By 1984, the first county finalized its map. So it took a while. It takes a long time to draw up those maps. And then by 1992, the first map amendment was made. We realized this isn't a perfect system. They need to be amended. But then by 95, we realized that the process to amend those maps is so long and arduous, and as my boss puts it, a paper tiger. So there needs to be a letter of addendum and an affidavit in posting that it's gonna be changed. There needs to be certified mail to all the stakeholders who are involved. And in order to get the maps updated, to make sure that all the wetlands that are 12.4 acres and greater in New York State were on those maps, it would cost about $7.5 million in order to amend the maps and make sure that the maps were correct. So by 2011, we really shifted efforts to remove the maps as regulatory because it was a very inefficient way. And there was a lot of wetlands being missed because we couldn't get to them because they weren't on the maps. Therefore, we couldn't regulate them, even though that they meet our jurisdictional criteria for protections. And they estimate there's about 1 million acres, additional acres of wetlands that are unmapped that we don't have. So that's the need for change. So we need this path forward, and how are we going to do it? So that's when in 2022, the legislation was passed to change Part 664 of the wetland program. So firstly, we're keeping that acreage threshold at the 12.4 threshold until 2028. And then in 2028, it decreases to 7.4 acres. So any wetland that's 7.4 acres or greater, we will regulate. In 2025, January 1st, there will be no more regulatory maps. They're informational maps. They will be available online, but for information purposes only and not legally binding. So we'll still have our, I don't know if you've been on it, but it's the environmental resource mapper. That is where you can find our the wetland map layer. And we haven't figured out yet because, well, I'll get into it a little further. We haven't figured out where those maps, those informational maps are going to live yet, if we're going to keep it within the environmental resource map or if it's going to be something different. So you might be saying, well, if there's no more regulatory maps, how is the jurisdictional determination going to happen? So we're going to be doing remote determinations. We're keeping the class 1 through class 4 status, but the remote determinations will happen here at central office. Now, I had mentioned we were allowed to do 5 new hires because of the legislation, and 3 of those were biologists, ecologists, and they work here at central office, and they are going to be the ones doing those remote determinations. So currently we have a contract with Cornell, and they are creating our wetland mapping. And so that is why when it is all said and done and complete, we don't really know where, how those maps are going to be housed yet for the public. We know they have to be, on our website, but we just don't know in what kind of format they will be. So there's going to be, we're proposing 35 class criteria instead of 40 and 9 class 1 criteria. So currently there's 40 class criteria and there's 7 class 1 criteria. So we're really trying to narrow down the definition of a wetland to try to make it as easy as possible, even though some wetlands are so variable and it's a hard thing to kind of put a stamp on. So the other thing we're proposing is jurisdictional determinations will remain valid for 5 years from the date of the determination. So our classification goal is that we want most of the wetlands to land within the class 2 and class 3 wetland. In assigning classifications, we are aiming for a normal distribution. And like I said, with a majority falling between that in that class and that class 3, in class 2s and class 3s. Sorry, I guess I should have had a cup of coffee. Too nervous late in the day. So we're also proposing to regulate smaller wetlands, and these will be called wetlands of unusual importance. So regardless of size, it's a wetland that possesses 1 or more of the following 11 characteristics as determined by the department. So these are the 11 characteristics. And we're going to go through a bunch of them, but if you just glance through it, watershed with significant flooding, urban areas, rare plants. So there's about the first 5.5 are very straightforward. and there's no, here we go. It's written into the regulation as stated, and there doesn't need to be any further identification or definition. So they're non-discretionary. There's no wiggle room, and we didn't have to just explain it. So for example, this first one, urban areas, it's urban areas according to the US Census Bureau. So they have a shapefile, and this is urban areas according to the Census Bureau. Then this other 5.5, now we're kind of transitioning from the non-discretionary to the discretionary. So we really needed to put our thinking caps on and figure out, well, how are we going to define these things? So we know that, you know, the governor called a housing crisis, but it's also a time of climate crisis. So how do we balance those two things? How do we protect the environment, but yet still allow for development? And this is what we came up with. So habitat for essential behavior of species of greatest conservation need. Looking at this one a bit deeper, we said, okay, species of greatest conservation need, we're going to define that are in the New York State Wildlife Action Plan. But essential behavior of species listed in this action plan, but we're also looking at where habitat loss has been identified by the department as a high or moderate threat to New York populations. So for our program's purposes, we're talking about the wetland habitat and for those wetland dependent species. Now, how we determined what essential behavior is we said essential behaviors include those associated with breeding, hibernation, reproduction, feeding, sheltering, migration, and overwintering. So taking a look at the next on the list that we had to define further, we go to the watersheds with significant wetlands that are in a significant flood zone. So to do this, we looked at the hydrologic unit codes, or the HUCs. So the United States Geological Survey created the HUC, hierarchical, you know the word, land area classification system based on surface hydrologic features. So the USGS uses a nationwide system to delineate the watersheds. And so we are looking at a HUC 12. So a HUC is a sequence of numbers or letters that identifies a hydrological unit or features. And HUCs are unique to each hydrologic unit and consist of 2 to 12 digits. So it's kind of counterintuitive because 2 is the largest area and 12 is the smallest area. So this is a picture of HUC 12s. And that is what we looked at in order to get the watershed with significant flooding. So we're tying the wetland regulations linked to the flood risk at the sub-watershed level or scale. And this is how we did. We looked at 3 different criteria. And so it's gonna be called a watershed with significant flooding in a HUC 12 if it has all of the following. And that's impervious surface greater than 2%, water storage area less than 5%, so lakes, ponds, wetlands, and reservoirs, and it's within 4 kilometers of an urban area. So this was our way of looking at runoff, water holding capacity, and human risk. Now, just thinking of these 3 things, 3 different criteria, I'm going to show you a couple maps that's going to show each one and how we kind of boiled it down. So the first one, this is factor 1, the impervious surface, impervious surface greater than 2%. So these are all the HUC 12s in the state that have this. This is factor 2, the water storage. And this is factor 3, within the 4 kilometers of an urban area. So if you put those 3 layers on top of each other, what it boils down to, all 3 criteria is here. So it seems like a lot at first, but then it boils down to this. which is still more wetlands than we regulated before. And now moving on to productive vernal pools. And I know this is a group that loves nature, and this is a very exciting time for New York because we've never regulated vernal pools before. So there was a lot we had to figure out. How are we going to do this? So looking at productive vernal pools, we looked at, to meet the criteria, we looked at species groups and geographic area. And also in the statute, it says we needed to post it on the website. We're not going to post specifically exact longitude, latitude of where that vernal pool is, because, you know, we want to keep protected as well. And we know that it could cause some issues where somebody might want to either collect species from it, or they don't want a vernal pool there because they want to have not be regulated. So looking at species groups, we looked at the common species, so spotted salamander and wood frog, and special concern species, so Jefferson salamander, blue spotted salamander, and the hybrids. Then we also looked at the listed species and rare oddball ones, so like the tiger salamander and the marble salamander. So we looked at geographic areas and these species because it was the Natural Heritage program that had already done an analysis of the vernal pools, of the productive vernal pools across New York State. And so in the statutory, it says known productive vernal pools. Well, this is how we found those. And according to them, the productivity according to egg masses, we figured out it would be spotted salamander, about 10 plus egg masses in the Adirondacks, in the Great Lakes, about 2 plus egg masses, Southern Tier 10 plus, Hudson Mohawk 55 plus egg masses, and the Lower Hudson, New York City, Long Island area 10 plus. So that's how this graph or this chart kind of reads. Now, because we did the advance notice of proposed rulemaking, we got some really good comments back and input, and through some good data that some really great ecologists gave us, it is determined that the Hudson Mohawk egg mass numbers are a bit high. So they're not going to be that high. We put in for the second round of comment, when it comes out, these numbers won't be the same. But by protecting, so our main goal in thinking is by protecting the pools that have this level of productivity, we are protecting the top 30% most productive vernal pools. So regulated vernal pools, the department shall create and maintain on its website a list of vernal pools known to the department, meeting the criteria in subparagraphs 1 through 6, paragraph G of this section. The department shall publish updates to the productive vernal pool listed on the list in the environmental notice bulletin. So that's what I was saying before. The statute is telling us we have to maintain a list of these vernal pools, and we have to notice or put in a notice of the environmental notice bulletin when they go on. So we're creating a registry, and this is a new program. So people are going to have to voluntarily give us their information in order to go through the process of creating a registered vernal pool. And like I said, we haven't shaken out the details of it yet. Right now, step 1 is just getting these regulations finalized, and then the standard operating procedures and all the fun stuff is yet to come. So class 1 wetland, that's pretty straightforward. A class 1 wetland we determined is a threatened endangered animal, threatened or endangered plant, significant coastal fish and wildlife habitat area, tidally influenced freshwater wetland not regulated by Article 25. So that Article 25 regulates saltwater wetlands. This word is contiguous to an Article 25 regulated tidal wetland, critically imperiled wetland plant community, nutrient poor wetland, in a FEMA floodway, or contiguous to drinking waters. So for example, freshwater wetlands that are contiguous to the Hudson River. And then looking at regional or local significance. So we looked at two criteria for this. One, if the wetland is located within an area specifically designated as a critical environmental area with specific reference to wetland protection by a local government. And two, the wetland is partially located within the Adirondack Park and jurisdictional to the Adirondack Park Agency. So that blue line, we know that wetlands don't adhere to that nice blue line that delineates the Adirondack Park. So extending adjacent areas. We looked at extending adjacent areas 300 feet for nutrient poor wetlands, and that is all these wetlands listed here. So they're they're affected very easily by excess nutrients going in. Therefore, they need a greater buffer zone to keep them safe. And then there's a portion about appeal of jurisdictional determinations. So the process moving forward, so right now with our regulatory maps, a person, if they have a parcel that they want to do a project on, build or whatever it is, and they think they have wetlands on it, then they would look at our environmental resource map. And because that is jurisdictional wetlands. So if it's not on the map, then they don't have wetlands. Well, going past January 1st of next year, if now it changes. Now you can still look at the informational maps. And if you think your parcel is anywhere near that wetland or a wetland, then you call central office and then we will give you a jurisdictional determination of whether or not there's a wetland on your property. And if you don't agree that there's a wetland on your property, the appeal of determination will go like this. There's an initial consultation, so a delineation on site, a field meeting to discuss where that wetland is. And then the applicant needs to complete a JD appeal application within 120 days from that initial consultation. And these are the acceptable basis of appeal. So if there's missing technical information, incorrect application of regulatory criteria, or incorrect application of guidance. And this part of changing Part 664 was our way of saying, this is a new system. We're going to make mistakes. And if we make a mistake, it's only a mistake for 5 years. And also it's a way to, wetland boundaries change naturally. So we need to be able to look at that as well and keep them up to date on the informational maps. And the informational maps are going to be updated quarterly, we're thinking. So then the department responds within 60 days. So I was talking earlier that we did an advance notice to propose rulemaking, and this was the content. So everything that I just went through with you, the significant flooding, the rare animals, vernal pools, local, regional significance, we broke it all down into 8 questions, and we asked just what I was explained to you. We said, this is what we're thinking, give us feedback. And then what did they say? So that went out January 3rd, and then the comment period closed at February 20th. So we got a huge response from Audubon and Sierra Club. They were having a little race to see who won. And then about 351 comments from all the others. So meaning private landowners, the energy section, utilities, renewable energy. And so some reoccurring themes we saw in the comments where people were concerned DEC will be overwhelmed, a legit concern. There's a lot of questions, so clarifying questions, definitions and stuff, and how are we going to implement this, data sets and stuff. But the implementation part, like I said, step 1 is getting the regs accepted and changed, and step 2 then comes all the rest. Questions about the JD process. questions about vernal pools. So a lot asking how it would be on getting on that registered list. And a lot of people, or like a lot of other states, don't require egg masses. We shouldn't have to require egg masses at all. Also, people were concerned that fairy shrimp were not being represented. And questions about the extended adjacent area, or to add an extended adjacent area for just vernal pools because they are such sensitive and special ecosystems. So there's some projects or other reoccurring things is projects in the pipeline. So if there was a project started this year, would they have to go back to square one as soon as January 1st of next year came? And the answer is no. Figuring out a timeline and what makes sense. So here is the timeline as of now. So we're hoping in July we get the notice of proposed rulemaking in the state register. Fingers crossed, happens the beginning of July. And then early September, we can start to hold public hearings. Mid-October, comment period closes. Early December, notice of adoption, informational maps available to the public. And then January 1st, new regulations take effect. So it's all going to be easy peasy and rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah, right.
Right. That is my, So the next steps, like I said, developing those informational maps, developing standard operating procedures for the remote jurisdictional determinations, and developing general permits. So we don't have much wiggle room because all the to make it as smooth of a process as we have, we do know there's going to be a transitional period where we're getting used to doing this, municipalities are getting used to do this, we're all kind of got to work together. And so we're thinking the general permits is a good way to be able to kind of help the easier projects move through the pipeline. So getting the word out. I love Buddy the Elf, like helping. So this is my way of saying I need some help getting the word out. So I'm creating educational materials, landowners guides. There's going to be a website update. So I will give whatever educational materials I have out to Christy, and then she can disseminate, or however you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to give them to you. But yeah, it's a lot of getting the word out to a whole state. So I like to close my presentation with this Chuck Norris quote. I've always found that anything worth achieving will always have obstacles in the way, and you've got to have that drive and determination to overcome those obstacles en route to whatever it is that you want to accomplish. And what we want to accomplish is more protection of wetlands. And so I think the drive for, those natural ecosystems is what's perpetuating us forward. So yeah, if any questions, I am happy to take a stab at them. So
Thank you, Krista. Do you want to read the questions in the chat, or would you like me to read them to you?
I can. So if I pop my chat open, everybody can see it because I'm on my screen sharing. Should I just stop sharing?
Sure. Yeah. If that works best for you, that's fine.
Yeah, so let me stop sharing. And then I can get this. Okay, so thank you for patiently waiting. I will get, I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. Let's see. Where can lake associations get watershed wetland maps? So that'll be on the website. And like I said, the maps are being created by Cornell. So we don't know exactly how it's going to look. We know they will be on the website, and how that's packaged is a different thing. But lake associations is on my contact list. And when I know it, I will share it. And then Please discuss the application of the wetland regulation to lakes and what are the wetland functions that a lake performs. So there's, yeah, I'm not the end all, I'm not the best to answer this question because I know I can get back to you with a more specific, but I do know there is lakes that have submergent aquatic vegetation. So, right, it's lakes that have more aquatic vegetation than others. Those perform more, that's a more of an emergent wetland or emergent marsh. And the application of the wetland regulations and what they are. So if it's considered, if there's a shallow weedy lake and there's submergent vegetation or subaquatic vegetation taking up a lot of the lake, that will be considered more of a wetland. So then the activities that are allowed in a wetland are all recreational activities. So there's still boating, there's still fishing, there's still swimming. The activities that are regulated in a wetland are things like dredging, building, filling, and herbicide. So those would be the things that are going to be regulated. How do you go about getting someone to assess a wetland for rare plants and animals? That will be in your region. You would call Bureau of Ecosystem Health, and they would be the ones to know like where your parcel is, where the wetland is. But also, so first step would be getting the wetland, jurisdictional wetland. So then right now that is just looking on a map. And then the second part would be calling your region and then asking them, okay, I think there might be rare or plants here. So they might know already whether or not in your region, depending on that wetland. And if they don't know, you can also get a environmental consultant to check. But I would say contact your region. And I can also drop in the link, the DEC webpage where it has each region for Bureau of Ecosystem, has each region and all the different divisions, and you would want to contact Bureau of Ecosystem Health. Can you discuss the intent of the DEC to regulate nearshore areas in all New York State lakes with 12.4 acres, 7.4 in 2028 containing submergent vegetation of any kind, including invasive species? The intent is to protect the wetland, and a wetland is considered that submergent vegetation in that lake it's not just a lake, it's a wetland. And so we regulate wetlands because of the ecosystems, because of the special functions that they provide. So one of those is taking up nutrients, right? If there's excess nutrients, so they will better be able to fight off algal blooms. Can a bay or a shoreline of a lake that has submergent vegetation, such as an invasive milfoil and natives, say in 5 foot of water, be a wetland? I can get back to you on that. I am not the ecologist, I'm sorry, but I will make a note. And okay, David Miller. See? Can you discuss delineation determination? Yes, there is a difference. So determination, that's the first step, a jurisdictional determination, just knowing whether or not that there is a wetland on your property. And then the delineation is a step further, and that needs to be on-site visit with either a DEC staff member or a an environmental consultant. And the a delineation is when they actually define exactly where those wetland boundaries are. So then you'll know exactly where that wetland is. And so then where's the buffer, the 100-foot buffer or adjacent area. Yes, I will give this to Christy and then she can pass it out to you guys. But yeah, it's also being recorded, so. I don't think I don't know about the APA and their wetland regulations, but I can find out. I haven't heard such a thing, but it doesn't mean it's not. Will a set of draft regulations upgraded from what was provided in December 2023 be issued for comment? No, this would be this is the second round of comment. So after this round of comment, then they will be, if they get accepted, then they will be law by January 1st. How does this apply to agricultural land? It is, it does not. So agricultural land is, what's the word? It is not. What? It's, yeah, so it doesn't, it's, it doesn't, yeah, agriculture and silviculture. Was there any feedback from county conservation districts, local waterkeeper alliance groups? Yes. There was a lot. I may have missed it, but will all the maps be completed by January 1st, 2025? Yes. Okay, this is a New York State Federation of Lakes audience. So please address the issues related to the application of wetlands regulations to the lakes. So like I said, within the lake, there's aquatic vegetation that turns that lake and that portion of the lake into the wetland, the activities that are regulated are not regulated or recreational. So boating, swimming, fishing. The things that are regulated are building, dredging, draining, filling. So if you have a dock and it's already there, then that's in kind. No permits are needed. If you have a dock and you want to extend it, then permits will be needed. And herbicide, that's another regulated activity. In the absence of regulatory maps, how will compliance enforcement be administered? So like I said, it is a call to the central office. Yes, this is a gray area because we've never done it before, but it's going to take a lot of work with each municipality and between the regions, the ECO officers, and us to try to be up on it. But yeah, it's a big shift and we know that there's a lot of work that's going to be coming down the pipeline and already is. But it's a movement forward. Change is scary. Did you say that all wetlands will be delineated using remotely sensed data? So there won't be any field delineations. Determinations and delineations are different. So all remote determinations, but then the delineations will be a site visit. I hope that answers that question. How long is a vernal pool considered active for? That is also something that came up in the comments. So the jurisdictional determination lasts for 5 years. But we were also talking about, you know, vernal pools that is the nature of them. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. So It has to be sussed out first. The regulations, like I said, have to be adopted, and then for now, it's that 5-year stamp, and we'll figure out further. The builders, oh yeah, they do not. I think, why is my thing not scrolling anymore? There we go. Your list of criteria for appealing a JD did not include disagreeing with the results. But the results are based on an office. Yes, that's the appeal. So that was part of the jurisdictional determination. You can appeal to that jurisdictional determination, and the first step to that appeal is there's an on-site visit, right? And then there was a whole list of next steps and then time frame that the appeal, how many days we have to get back to you, how many days. The applicant has 120 days to send us the appeal after that initial on the ground delineation of the wetlands. So first is the determination. They don't like the determination. Then the first step to appealing that is an on-site visit. And then after that, the applicant has 120 days to send in a letter of appeal. So you said if a project was started this year, they could have to go back to do they have to go back to square one next year? No. Can you explain what started means? My projects will cost millions in permitting and design and the EP work before construction will start. Does that mean the new regs will not affect them? So there is a time frame that they are figuring out. So larger projects, what constitutes a larger project, what constitutes a smaller project. I can send it to Christy when I add the PDF of this, of what the time frame we are currently looking at for those projects. I just didn't add it into this presentation. I don't want to say exactly what they are without it in front of me because I don't want to misquote it. Will active wetland joint permits still be good for the duration of the permit? Active. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out this question. And it could be something as I just don't understand the terminology. But my initial thought is it depends on what the project is. The first step of the Bureau when it comes to wetland protection is avoidance and then mitigation. So it all depends on the activity that the person is trying to do. I'm writing down your name and your question, and I can get back to you.
Krista, he rephrased that.
Okay, thanks. I'm like, what? If I had permit issues this past year and was good for 3 years, would it still be valid for the duration? I don't want to be misquoted, but I feel like you already have the permit. And again, it depends on the project. So I still want to check to just make sure I don't tell you the wrong thing. Right. Yeah, and Kevin had said it. I assume this is asking if a permit has been issued, will it remain in effect after the new regs if it hasn't expired yet? And I do believe, yes, it will remain effective still after the new regs, but I just want to double check on that before. I just want to make sure. If a lake area has invasive that affects the shallow areas, you cannot use the herbicide to control. This will hurt fish reproduction. Has the DEC considered this? There are other systems that it affects as well. I agree, yes. I'm just gonna say yes. Without a delineation, determination, everything is presumed to have wetlands. Eliminating the maps, eliminate safe use land. I don't think that that's the case. I think there's many states, we're one of the last states that still do it in this manner. The Army Corps of Engineers doesn't even use maps. So yes, it is a change. We've all been used to looking at maps and having that safety net. But in order to move forward and protect these ecosystems, and they're really important ecosystems, that we come from a society systemically hating wetlands. Our government used to pay us to fill them in, turn them into construction, turn them into agriculture. And now in these times where we're clearly seeing there's a definite effect to how we manipulate the landscape, these are one of the few things that can help us in these times of excess water and extreme weather. So we should be protecting them. Yes, thank you. Exempt is the word, David. Okay, Adrian, I'm reading yours about the bog turtles. And it's, yes, I see your frustration. It's not probably a lack of want, but it's probably a lack of time. But I'm gonna reach out to the Wetland Trust and I will email you. And if you could tell me the parcel where you're thinking bog turtles are. Okay. There is a mention of general permits. Is there a plan to have a general permit for herbicide applications? Since that is activity that is regulated by a pesticide permit and a general perm for the discharge of the herbicide. Herbicide use does not eliminate the function and benefit of the wetland as currently regulated. That is part of it. That's another, but again, I don't know how it's gonna shake out. It is in consideration. What kinds of general permits may be expected, e.g. what work will be covered, including amount of that work. So I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Things like getting maintenance, that is a good use for a general permit, right? Just trying to maintain what's already been there. No. And we want to, if there's a concern in your area or in your township of, you know, there's, especially I know there's a lot in lakes. If there's a concern, then we will work with you to try to figure out what that is, that general permit can be. So agriculture, and I thought you said silviculture were exempt. Is this existing, or if they want to clear new land for agriculture purposes, will that be exempt? Agriculture, so agriculture and silviculture, those are addressed in a different part. And so not part 664. So we opened up part 664 and it's part 663 that those have in it. And so I think ultimately, if they want to clear new land for agriculture purposes, will that be exempt? I think because yes, it's in a different part. So it's exempt. They can be allowed to do that. But that is something that raises I just want to make sure, Mike. And Okay. How is Cornell verifying their remote-based mapping process? They started ground truthing it this month. So I don't know which parts of the state there is a system, but I know they started this month and they're going through all summer. And they also have, we have given them a bunch of data that we've already ground truthed. Our energy sector, the team that works on the, what am I trying to say? The team that works on the new energy projects that are coming through, they've been using the GIS mapping system and very more high tech. So they have been used to already calling the regions and having them ground truth their GIS system. So we've given Cornell a lot of information already that has already been ground truthed. Sorry, I keep getting lost in the comments. So David, to ask the question differently, if you cannot use an herbicide to control invasive plants, how can we control, because it has been proven that invasives change the ecosystem of a lake? I know there's different ways to control it. The herbicide has been like the pulling the harvesting method. But herbicide has been the more effective. But again, it is a slippery slope of those herbicides within the water and what they do affect. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you. Let's see. Are triploid carp permitted to be introduced in a lake to control weeds and invasives? I don't know, but I will find out.
Krista, I had a message that was sent directly to me. It says, if the person wants to develop and doesn't want there to be a wetland, why would they report at all?
That's the problem. So that's why we need, that's how it is now already. There's a lot of things that get developed and then ECO officers can't be everywhere at once. There's not enough. And so often we see things after things have gotten built, and then it's a messier situation of tearing it down or mitigating some other way. So yeah, that's the problem. And that's also, you have to think of the history of where we come from in our mindset of wetlands. There's not a love for wetlands. If I am the first person in 2023 to be the proponent for the environmental conservation to say that wetlands are great, then nobody's really gonna know this is, so it's kind of, we got a long way to go, but this is the first step.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Krista. That was very informative. I know I learned a lot, and to everybody who participated, it was recorded, and I'll be sending the recording out so that you can all see it. And Krista, is it okay if people have follow-up questions? Can they contact you?
Absolutely,
Mhm.
because I can also reach out to my team that's here and get answers to questions that I wasn't able to answer here.
Okay, and Krista, can you tell me what that email is, and I'll type it in the chat box?
Oh yeah, sorry, I had it on my last slide, but then I stopped sharing. So it's just
Okay.
Krista, Krista .Spohr, SPOHR @dc.ny.gov.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Have a great night, everybody.